Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about what is for me the greatest rock bands, albums and gigs, and metal of course, of all time, based on me listening to thousands of albums and going to hundreds of gigs over many years. If you like what you see today, please press the red button to subscribe. Doesn't cost you any money, will only take you a few seconds to do, and I will be very grateful so that you can see future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. And you certainly need to subscribe if you're watching today, because today is a special 3-part episode. So to make sure you don't miss parts 2 and 3, today part 1, then please subscribe so you'll be notified when the next parts come up. Because today I am just going to do the first part in the ranking of AC/DC's studio albums. They've got a massive discography of studio albums, 16 studio albums. Now, some of you may debate that, it's more than 16. Well, let me explain why I'm saying 16. Okay, in the early days of AC/DC, their first 2 albums were released in Australia. And then the first international release of their first international album was basically a combination of those first 2 albums, and then at a later date the tracks that didn't make that were issued on the Jailbreak 74 EP. So I'm going to be talking about the international releases. I am an international person, so there are 16 international studio albums, and let's start with number 16. Number 16 on my list, so bottom of the list, something's got to be bottom of the list, is the 1988 album titled Blow Up Your Video. Blow Up Your Video. Okay, so why is this bottom of my list? Well, you can see I went to the gig. In fact, the gig or the tour for this album was much better than the album itself. The reason why is there really was not a consistently strong selection of songs on this album. Now what I'm going to do for each album, I'm going to pick my 2 favourite tracks on the album. And unfortunately for me, really there are only 2 standout tracks on this album. After that, pretty much the rest of it is filler in my opinion. I think in the late 80s, AC/DC were trying to find their place again in the rock and metal music world. They'd had such amazing success with their Highway to Hell, Back in Black album especially, and For Those About to Rock albums. And then the success had started to wane a bit, and they were trying to find their place in the rock and metal world again. Especially as now we're in the age of MTV, and music videos and how you look and how you present your image were very important too. Now they did do pretty bad with that when it comes to the videos, because actually the 2 standout tracks on this album were also the 2 singles for which they made videos. So for me, the tracks that I would choose are the first track on the album, Heat Seeker, 'cause I'm a heat seeker, burning up the sky. Great song, yeah. One thing that you can say about all AC/DC albums, you can always pick at least 2 brilliant songs on their albums, and Heat Seeker is a great track. I don't know when it was last played live, probably on this tour, or even on the Razor's Edge tour. But for me, it's a great track, and I'd like to see it back in the set list actually. The next track I would choose would be That's the Way I Wanna Rock and Roll. There wouldn't be an AC/DC album without a song with rock and roll in the title. And that's the way I wanna rock and roll. good track again. A great track, actually, great track. So they would be my two picks from this album. An album, as I say, not blessed with many great songs, in my opinion. Okay, next on the list at number 15, from the year 2000, Stiff Upper Lip. Again, why is this so low down in the ranking? Because, again, Stiff Upper Lip Tour, brilliant gigs on the Stiff Upper Lip Tour. I will never forget seeing them live in Milton Keynes, at the Milton Keynes Bowl on this tour. It was a fantastic gig, really, really great gig. And there's also a brilliant video, here we go, Stiff Upper Lip live video, which really captures how good that tour was. Unfortunately, the album was not so great. At the time, it was considered a good comeback album for AC/DC, and it was considered pretty strong. But I think if you revisit it, as I have done in recent times, you'll see it's really not up to the quality of many of the other albums. That's why it ranks so low. Favourite tracks? The title track, Stiff Upper Lip. One thing I've always loved about AC/DC songs, I love the double entendres and the sexual lyrics in a lot of the AC/DC songs. I think they're very, very clever, the way the lyrics are written. And none better than I was born with a stiff upper lip. And being an Englishman, that's a phrase that is used quite often about the English. They have stiff upper lips, old man, or dear boy, or whatever you want to call it. So, Stiff Upper Lip would be one of the tracks that I would choose, and the next track I will choose will be Satellite Blues, another great track, a good sing-along, bop-along kind of song, Satellite Blues. Another thing I'd like to say about this album, I think the artwork is brilliant. I really love the artwork on this album, and it was replicated live as well. They built this giant statue of Angus, and it's still one of my favourite live presentations. When you see AC/DC live, you know you're always going to get a big show. And that was one of my favourite things that they've done and the live representation. Okay, let's take a little bit of a break and let's take a look at Rock T-shirts by the Sea. Hope you enjoyed that. So, at number 14 on the rankings is one of their newer albums. It's the album from 2014, and it is Rock or Bust. What can I say about this album? Well, it's again down at the bottom of the rankings, and the reason why is for exactly the same reasons as with Stiff Upper Lip and Blow Up Your Video. There's just not enough great songs on this album, in my opinion. Now, one thing I would like to say is that I've been listening to this album quite a lot again in more recent times, and it's starting to grow on me a lot more, actually. So it might well be that it sneaks up the rankings a little bit, and any of you who feel similar to me about this album, and that's it's something that you kind of didn't play so much after you first had your first few listens, and around the time of the tour as well, go back and give it a listen, because it's a bit more of a grower than probably anticipated at the time. So yeah, go back to this, rock or bust. Now, once again, like the albums that I've already discussed, it's got 2 brilliant tracks on it, and it's the opening 2 tracks. So, and the 2 tracks that were chosen as the singles again. So, certainly I would recommend the song Rock or Bust, which opens the album, and then the next song, which is Play Ball. So those 2 tracks certainly are very, very good tracks, and they made their way into the set list for the tour. Obviously for the Rock or Bust tour, and I've talked about this on a previous episode, this was the tour that kind of got all messed up a little bit, because after the first leg of the tour, Brian Johnson, the singer, had problems with his hearing, and then Axl Rose took over for a few dates on the final leg of this tour. So the Rock or Bust album will always be associated for me with the Axl DC tour. And also in terms of the stage presentation of that tour, it wasn't as great as we'd seen on previous AC/DC tours, in my opinion. It was a little bit more toned down than some of their previous ones. But it's a good album, don't get me wrong, it's a good album. Moving on to the next one, at number 13 on my list. Now, many long-time AC/DC fans would actually probably be surprised that I ranked this as high as 13. The album I'm talking about is Fly on the Wall album. And a lot of critics at the time panned it. A lot of AC/DC fans don't rank it that highly. Why do I rank it as high as number 13? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, let me mention why it gets panned quite a lot by people. And that's for the production and the sound. It wasn't considered a great sounding album. It was produced at the time by Angus and Malcolm Young, so there wasn't an outside producer involved. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of the best AC/DC albums have had an outside producer involved. And here they just didn't get it sounding that great. However, I rank it highly because I kind of get through the sound of the album into the songs. And I think there's a lot of very, very good songs on this album. I particularly like the title track, Fly on the Wall, and the other track that I would choose, going back to my liking of their sexual lyrics, Sink the Pink. Sink the pink, it's on the fashion. Love that song. I think it's a great, great song. Again, both tracks were singles off this particular album. And there's some great songs on here. Shake Your Foundations is another good song. Danger, another one that I really, really like. And Back in Business. Back in business again. A lot of good songs on here, let down by the production. And I would check it out. If it's not one that you've checked out so much, then certainly give Fly on the Wall a listen. And I like the album cover as well. I like Fly on the Wall tour. I was lucky enough to go to that, and I've always liked that fly that they created, the artwork for this tour and album. Okay, let's take another little break and have a look at rock t-shirts by the sea. Hope you enjoyed that. So, on this first part of ranking the AC/DC albums, I'm just going to take us down on number 12 and number 11. So, number 12 in the ranking is the album from 2008, Black Ice. Now, this album, whew, this could have been a top 10 album. There are a lot of very, very good songs on this album. The only reason it didn't make the top 10 for me is I say there's a lot of songs on it and a lot of good songs. There's just too many songs on it. One of the problems I have with rock and metal bands today is often they feel they've got to fill a CD with an hour or 65 minutes, 70 minutes, even 80 minutes of music. And in my opinion, not many bands can pull off 80 minutes of music at one time, at one particular creative time. It's very, very difficult to do. Of course, there have been a few that have created amazing double albums. You've got, obviously, the ones that come to mind, you've got Pink Floyd's The Wall. You've got AC/DC, Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion albums, which again, many people will say there's a bit of filler on there, but for me, everyone's a winner on the Use Your Illusion albums. That was a real creative time for Guns N' Roses. And then I'm starting to struggle in terms of double albums or albums of 70, 80 minutes worth of music where it's consistently at a very, very high level. I'm sure there's many more if I sit down again and think about it. So that was the only problem with this album for me. There were just too many songs. And if they'd have trimmed the fat a little bit, this would have been a definite top 10 album. My favourite two songs on the album are Rock and Roll Train and now one that I'm going to pick from one of the deeper cuts, which I really, really like, and that is Money Made. Why did I pick Money Made? Money Made would not be on a list of songs chosen by many people as being top songs from this particular album. But I have my own particular memories regarding Money Made. And it was being in a strip club and watching some very nice ladies dancing to that particular song. Whoever the DJ was, inspired to pick that song as a song for dancers. Money Made indeed. So there you go, that's Black Ice at number 12. And now, just outside the top 10 at number 11, there is this album, Flick of the Switch. At a flick of the switch, blow your sky high. Flick of a Switch. That's the title track, and I love the title track. That's one of my chosen tracks from Flick of the Switch album. 1983, this album. This was the follow-up to the mega For Those About to Rock album, which had been the follow-up to the even megara Back in Black album. And again, an album that wasn't particularly loved by the critics and some of the AC/DC fans at the time. And I don't know why. Because, okay, it doesn't have the Mutt Lange production values that Highway and Back in Black and For Those About to Rock had, but it's still chock full of great, great songs. As I say, Flick of the Switch was one of them. My other pick, a song that will always be etched in my brain as the first song I ever saw AC/DC play live, and it's the song Guns for Hire, which was their opening track on the gig that I saw, Flick of the Switch tour, that was Donington in 1984. So forever etched in my mind seeing Angus alone on the stage starting Guns for Hire song. Brilliant song and a great album. So there you have it. That is the first part of my ranking of the AC/DC albums. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please press the red button to subscribe. It won't take you long to do and it's free. And in a future episode we will see part 2 of the ranking of the AC/DC albums. And until next time, remember as always, we rock!